We might have some stragglers coming in, so if the attendance sheet is still going around, please make sure that the people who haven't filled it out sign it. For those of you that did come in late, we have an attendance sheet going around. It has your name and your email. If you fill those both out and put a check mark next to your name or email, we will send this to you, or Darrell will send this to you if your name has a check mark, because you may want to have these slides for the future, right? It'll be some really good information. So a few key points that some of you might need to know. Some of you, your instructors may have said, fill this sheet out and bring it back to them, and then you will get extra credits. If you are one of those students, I have a stack of those going around somewhere. If you don't have that, if you need that, let me know, I'll go make some more copies. It is pretty simple. It's list 3 things you learned from this workshop. You list those things, fill it out really completely. And then in the space provided, describe how you will implement the things that you learned, or describe at least one thing that you learned today and how you will implement that in your life. The other thing that I have handed out, if you don't have one of these, please let me know. Because this is a workshop series that we're doing, and this is the first time, and this is only my 2nd year here at the college, I have these little forms. You are not critiquing how our presenters present, but the material. If it's helpful to you, I want you to answer these questions honestly. This is confidential, and then we left a space for you to leave some comments. So maybe something that really stood out to you that you really liked, you'd like to put that down. We want to know about that. I do share that with the presenters. So the last thing I will just introduce. Are there any questions as we begin? So I'll introduce Darrell Dickeson. He works with the Wenatchee Valley College Foundation. He's a board member. He has over 40 years experience in working with people to help improve their performance and utilize more of their personal and professional potential. So he shared with me that when he saw this call, this last quarter when I sent this out, and he saw achieving your potential, that really struck a chord with him. So he's got a wealth of knowledge in this area. So I hope you guys are ready to take some notes, ask some questions. This is a really good venue for you to, share an experience that you have, or open up this discussion. He has lots of things that he will cover, but feel free to ask questions. In the early 80s, he worked for a Seattle personal effectiveness and motivational training company called the Pacific Institute. And the founder of the institute, Lou Tice, was the personal coach to current Seahawks coach, Pete Carroll. So he's got lots of stuff to draw on. I will, let you to continue on this story a little bit. So let's give him a warm welcome.
Brett, just so you know, I'm going to come back here later, but Brett's trying to work the camera here. Well, welcome. I'm overwhelmed at the response. I'm very happy to be here today. I feel this morning a little bit like what a minister might feel like in church. With the congregation seems like everybody kind of goes to the back. So I guess this is the A students. Is that how that works? All right. Just to reiterate a couple of points that Ryan made. If you want a copy of the slide deck, just put a check mark by your name, and I'll be happy to send that to you. So in terms of taking notes, take whatever notes obviously you want, but just know that you'll have that coming. And I will try to do my best to point out when I think maybe there's a pertinent point or information that you might really want to jot down to highlight. So also he talked about participation, and in 50 minutes or 45, maybe or less, we have a lot of information to cover. So the participation may be a little difficult, but if you can do anything to add to what I'm saying in terms of having had your own experience where you can validate what I'm saying, jump in and share that, because that really helps people know that this is real stuff. It's not just academic or theoretical. Do you have something?
Yeah, one more thing, sorry. The logistics piece. If you do need that extra credit, we will be available afterward to sign it. Make sure you get that signature, because instructors wanted those. So on the bottom of that extra credit form, we'll sign that.
That's great.
All right.
All right. So also, I thought about my introduction. I mean, I know how to introduce myself. I know what I've done, right? And we all have opportunities to introduce ourselves, but I thought long and hard about this particular session and this audience. Who would be in this audience? And so I wanted to introduce myself to you in a little different way, and I'm going to share some information that maybe even some of my colleagues don't know about me because it doesn't come up. So, first of all, I was born and raised in Leavenworth. I came from an upbringing, modest family means, but with an environment of love and support. I would say that we would be considered a middle-class family in the Leavenworth community, and probably a lower middle-class family by nationwide demographics. So my point here is that I didn't have a golden or silver or whatever spoon in my mouth. I raised up just as a regular common kid from Leavenworth, but the good news is that I did not come from an abusive family, or I didn't come from poverty. So it's all kind of relative, right? And what I'm going to be talking about today has everything to do with who we think we are, and how we identify ourselves and our abilities and what we are capable of doing. None of my family had previously graduated from college, and I don't know why I knew this, but I had no question or doubt in my mind that I would obtain my college degree. Upon graduating from high school, I attended my first 2 years of college here at Comanche Valley College. I then transferred to Central Washington State College, which it was called at the time, where I received my bachelor's degree in business administration and economics. Never in my wildest dreams did I expect to accomplish the ensuing life that I've been blessed to experience. Except to say that many of the concepts that I'm going to share with you today, either by accident or good fortune, have certainly contributed to the successes that I have enjoyed in my life. I guess what I'm trying to say is, if I can do it, anybody can do it. Y'all can do it, okay? My first career of 9 years involved working with the developmentally disabled in institutional settings governed by the Washington State Department of Social and Health Services. And my career progressed at an early stage of my life where, at the age of 27, I was managing a department of over 400 employees that served 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, the direct care needs of over 700 developmentally disabled residents. So I guess you could say this is where I cut my teeth in terms of management training and the experience that I had in that arena. During this period of my life, I went on to obtain my master's degree in management while working full-time. And, you know, I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but you guys all know this is yet a couple of full-time jobs, right? So there's something in there about desire, determination, commitment that I want you to, some themes I want you to start hearing and thinking about. After 12 years of marriage and 2 children, I went through a divorce in 1978. That was the most devastating experience of my life. I went immediately from knowing what I was going to do for the rest of my life and career to not knowing what I was going to do tomorrow. It was a real tough time. And my point here again is life gives us ups and downs. So it's not all, wonderful and smiley face all the time. That's just part of life. It's how you deal with it that makes the difference. My former wife immediately remarried and moved to Montana with her new husband and our 2 children. At the time, I was living and working in Medical Lake, Washington, with no particular interest in remaining there alone. So I did the prudent thing of quitting my successful 9-year career, buying a brand new 280ZX, and moving to Seattle. That's when I went to work for the Lou Tice at the Pacific Institute. I had gone through a lot of soul searching and asking myself what I wanted to do with the rest of my life, and I didn't know enough to know that I couldn't do what I was to do next. So sometimes, it's okay not to know everything, because sometimes we look at ourselves. I never thought that I could go to work for the Pacific Institute. That was really never my goal. But I ran into them along the way, and lo and behold, I didn't know that they didn't want me, or that I wasn't qualified or whatever, so I showed up and went to work for them. The Pacific Institute is a motivational and personal effectiveness training company that works with a wide range of high-performance people around the world from all aspects of life and experiences. So business people, people in prison, professional athletes, a whole gamut. This is where I was introduced to many of the tools and techniques that I'll be sharing with you here today. When I joined the Pacific Institute in 1980, they had a program called Achieving Your Potential, which was a 3-day seminar. So as Ryan said, when I saw this Achieving Your Potential, I kind of lit up, Now, I know we don't have 3 days here, so I'm going to give you the high points of not only what we had in that seminar, but other things that I've learned, sage tips and tools and techniques that I've learned along the way. I do hope, though, today to provide you, when you leave here, some very specific tools and techniques that you can use and actually go out and start implementing this afternoon. So hopefully it's not going to be too academic, and you do have the slides coming. For what it's worth, the rest of my career was involved working in the corporate world for about a dozen years. I held positions as Director of Organization and Management Development for the Boeing Company at one point in time. I also became Vice President of Human Resources for a high-tech company in the Seattle area called Advanced Technology Laboratories. And what they did is they manufactured medical diagnostic ultrasound machines. And then for the past 20 years, I've been an independent consultant. And moved back here to Wenatchee 3 years ago. I've had the pleasure of joining the board, working with some of these wonderful people. And Casey Thrift, if you don't know Casey, she is my barometer to know about reality checks, because we have some age differences. And I will be talking about something, and that's one of the fun things about our board. We have a diversity of ages and experience, that kind of thing. So when we start talking and Casey's going like, what? So, oh, maybe I should rephrase that. You weren't born then. So anyway, let me find out about you a little bit. How many of you are athletes? How many of you are artists? Couple. How about musicians, singers? How about golfers? No golfers? Have any of you ever golfed? How many of you have ever golfed? Well, you're all golfers. But the reason I asked you the question is you all just told me a lot about yourself and your self-image as whatever it is. An A student, are you an A student? How many A students? B, C, we'll stop. But what you see is what you get. There used to be what is the name of that guy in a skit on television? I know I won't call on you, Casey, for this one, but what you see is what you get. Remember that saying? Anyway, what you see, what you can visualize in your mind, that's what you get in life. And I'm going to explain a little bit why that happens. I'm going to start off by kind of going to the end of the story, if you will, and then I'll come back and fill in about why and how we got there. But here are the main points that I'm going to make today during our time together. And also, Ryan said that I should try to wrap my material up by about 10 till, and that way, if those of you need to get to a class or back to work or whatnot, we'll have plenty of time to do that. But I'll start probably going into a Q&A about that time, and then I'm willing to stick around for as long as you want me to and spend as much time as you want. All right, so here we go. Any of you ever seen this saying? Henry Ford. Very well known, and if you stop to think about it, it's absolutely true. If you think you can do something or you think you can't, you're almost always right. And so that kind of talks about beliefs and attitudes that we all have in our own mind. How good of a student or an athlete or an artist or singer am I? Because do you have any idea what percentage of our potential we use as human beings? How much?
Maybe 30%.
Maybe 30?
2.
How?
2.
2. 2, and I got 2, got 30, anybody get 40, get 50, 60? Studies show that we use between 5 to 8% of our potential. And so that means that all of us, as I look around the room, I don't know this for sure, but I think all of us could be singers or artists or athletes if we wanted to. So unless you have some severe handicap or something like that that prevents you from doing something, we can pretty much do what we decide to do and what we want to do. Eleanor Roosevelt, I love this saying that she has: no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. And that has to do with self-image and self-esteem. It doesn't matter what people say about you. If you don't accept it and endorse it, you don't have to buy it or own it. And then most recently, I don't know how many of you know this person, but Paul Pugh is one of our local celebrities, if you will, in town, who just recently passed away this week. And he started the Wenatchee Youth Service some 50 years ago. And I just happened to reading in the paper this week, and he said, don't be afraid to dream big, but be prepared to work for it. And I think that's really an important key too, because I think someone like myself could create a panacea, if you will, of, you know, oh, you can go out and be anything, do anything. And there may be some truth to that, but I also want you to know that there's generally a price that comes along with that. I say here, the fairy godmother is not coming. You know, or maybe another way of saying it is there's not necessarily a free lunch. So I don't want to sugarcoat this and say this is easy stuff. So I have a little test for you to see, you told me what you are or aren't in terms of athletes and so on and so forth. How many of you are honest people? Oh, I see most of the hands going up anyway. That's good, because I'm going to give you a little test, and all I'm going to ask you to do is to tell me the truth. So is everybody willing to tell me the truth? Okay, nobody's going to, okay, you're all in. I'm going to show you a sentence, and I want you to read through the sentence one time quickly, and then I'm going to give you a little test. Okay? So let me go back for a minute. If I were to ask you to repeat verbatim to me what that sentence said, how well would you do? I'm hearing grumble, head shaking, not very well. Why is that? Because the sentence doesn't make a lot of sense, does it? It's kind of poorly constructed, it's kind of confusing, right? So I want you to succeed, I don't want you to fail. So I'm not going to ask you to tell me what that sentence said verbatim. So I'm going to ask you to do something much more simple this time. I'm going to show this sentence again, and I want you to quickly go through the sentence, and I want you to count out the numbers of letters, say F, like in Frank, that are in the sentence. Tell me how many F's are in this sentence. Okay? How many is C2? There, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about, oh, quite a few of them. How about 3? Oh, most people. 4. Oh, few people. 5. Oh, 3, 4, 4. 6. Nobody got 6. Okay, so what's the truth? You're all looking at the same sentence, aren't you? So are there 2 or 3 or 4 or 5? And I'm going to tell you that the truth is there are 6. Where are they? Where are they? Why is that?
There's 2
Yes,
three
look at the word of, O-F. How many F's are now in the sentence? 5. So why did that happen? Because you all are honest people. You all told me the truth, right? But you had different truths, didn't you? So people don't act in accordance with the truth necessarily. They act in accordance with what they perceive to be true. Well, I think that people are oftentimes telling the truth, but they're seeing a different truth than I'm seeing. Or they're seeing a different number of F's. Scotoma is a word. A scotoma is, in fact, I'll go to the next slide. We'll talk about that a little bit. But this is all important stuff in terms of knowing about, why and how you can perform or not perform based on information. A scotoma is a sensory locking out or a blind spot. The word comes from blindness, the Greek word meaning blindness. And basically what it says is that based on our past education, our experiences in life, the way we've been trained or conditioned, that filters the information that we either let in or don't let in. So why was it that most of you got less than 6 F's? It was not because you're poor readers, probably because you're good readers. Because when we learn to read, how do we learn to read? Phonetically. We sound out the word, right? So when I had you read the sentence the first time, without telling you what to look for, subconsciously you were seeing the F, most of you were seeing the F as a V, because it sounds like O-V. When I brought you back consciously and asked you to find the F's, you had a scotoma or a blind spot to the F in the word of, because probably of how you were conditioned to read. Another possible example of that is that of is a very small, insignificant word, right? So a lot of us kind of speed read and stuff. We have a tendency to just kind of skip over those words. But again, it's just a form of conditioning. If you ask a 2 or a 3 or 4-year-old, probably 2 or 3-year-old these days, about how many F's are in that sentence, they say, why, 6, of course. Why do you ask? because they haven't been conditioned the same way that we have. So our conditioning affects how we see the world. How many of you see a picture of a woman in this photo? Most of you? Everybody see a woman yet? And some of you have maybe seen this like in some of your psychology classes. So how many see the woman that's young and beautiful and attractive? And I'd say about half or a little less than half. So how many, the rest of you see the old haggy witchy kind of, and some of you see both. How many of you honestly could not see both right now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Quite a few of you. Okay, and that's fine. That's normal. This is called, in psychology, it's called cognitive dissonance. We call it, for shorthand in the development and training world, the Lolo effect. Lock on, lock out. Once you lock on to the young woman or the old woman, typically you lock out the other. And it's oftentimes very difficult for you to see both. And so I'll send the slide deck to you, so if some of you still can't see both, I don't want to have any psychological problems or issues. I will tell you, however, that if this helps, this is the chin of the old woman, witchy woman, kind of in her chest. This is her mouth, her upper lip, her nose, the eye. Where the younger woman, this is her eyelashes, more of a profile. She's looking over her right shoulder. So this is her hair or headdress, whatever it is, down to her eye, her cheekbone, down to her chin. I don't know if that helps or not. So again, I'll be willing to stay late. You know. Any problems there? So why did I share that stuff with you? Well, most of the information that Lou Tice from the Pacific Institute, and a lot of people, they actually used to call it self-image psychology, that they taught, and it was all kind of based on the work of Dr. Maxwell Maltz, wrote a book probably in the 1960s called Psycho-Cybernetics. And so if you want to learn more about how all this stuff works, I recommend that you check that book out. It's got a lot of good information, and a lot of that we're going to cover right now has to do with that very information. What Dr. Maltz says is that the thought process, or the brain, basically has 3 components to it. So this is very elementary. This is not meant to be scientific and detailed, but it'll give you the general feeling or idea of how our brain works. So there are 3 parts: the consciousness, the subconscious, and the creative subconscious. So I have labeled the conscious state Captain Conscious because on a large ship, I don't know if you know this, but the captain of the ship is typically up above the waterline in the wheelhouse, giving directions and that type of thing, right? Most of the crew and all the machinery and stuff that runs the ship is below the waterline. They can't see what the Captain Conscious can see. They are what we refer to as a servo mechanism, like a servant. They act like a servant, and they do literally what the captain tells them to do. They literally follow the orders that Captain Conscious sends to them in blind faith, because they can't see anything. Does that make sense? All right. So what's the role of Captain Conscious? Through the 5 senses, Captain Conscious perceives things: sees, smells, hears, so on and so forth. And very quickly, we all do this. Anytime we perceive something, we do 3 things very quickly. We associate, have I seen anything like this before? We evaluate, what is this probably leading me towards? Something pleasant or something unpleasant? And then, based on that evaluation, we make a decision. We do this, we do that, we go this way, we go that way. So that's all fine and logical, okay? Until then you see the arrow. So then what we do, Captain Conscious takes that information and he ships it downstairs under the water line to the subconscious area. And you probably all heard this, but they say that our brain is like 30,000 times stronger, faster, more capable than any computer that has at least been developed to date. So our brain, our subconscious, is literally a supercomputer. So what does that do? Now, what happens when Captain Conscious sends that information down there is we label it at our computer level the truth. Or reality is another popular word. So go back to the F's. You all told me the truth, right? But you had different truths. You had different realities. You had different experience. Other words that go along with the truth and reality are things like beliefs, our attitudes, our self-image and self-esteem, something that are called comfort zones. That's an area that helps us be regulated to act normally, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into the creative subconscious. But you also notice on that arrow now I added a couple of initials, G-I-G-O. Everybody know what that means? In computer terminology, that stands for garbage in, garbage out. So the computer, again, is a servo mechanism. It doesn't make any judgment, it just records what it's programmed to receive. So Captain Conscious, Captain Conscious may have been drunk at the helm one night, and given orders and whatnot, and the subconscious doesn't know that. Again, they literally, accepts and follows the orders. Well, then part 3, the creative subconscious, its main job is to maintain sanity, or reality again. Sanity is the most important thing in the world to all of us, whether we know it or not. And so if what I am perceiving on my conscious level of awareness doesn't match the computer program or the truth in my subconscious, I've got a conflict, right? So it's the job of the creative subconscious to resolve that conflict. And so you see things like problem solving, drive and energy. The creative subconscious takes care of all the automatic functions of our body. We don't have to think about breathing and our blood circulating and all that kind of stuff. That's all handled. Drive and energy has to do with motivation. And so in motivation, people have a tendency to move toward pleasure, things of pleasure, and move away from things of pain. So depending on your perception of that, I see something and it doesn't match my picture, there's tension. And that tension creates motivation, energy, drive, creativity to resolve the problem. Let me give you a couple of examples. I told you I went through a divorce. That was a very painful experience for me. And 2 kids, and it was just the most difficult thing I ever had to deal with. And so for a number of years after my divorce, if I happened to perceive the opportunity to get involved in a relationship with another person, I might associate, have I seen anything like this before? I might evaluate, what is this probably leading me toward? Something pleasurable or something painful? And I might very creatively decide to just not get involved or to avoid getting involved in a relationship that may have been an absolutely perfectly wonderful relationship. Because the truth and reality that was down in my computer was, this is painful, this is not fun, man, it's scary. In fact, I will have to admit to you, I was single for about 5 years, and when my wife and I met and married, we've now been married 33 years, I would say for the first year or so of our marriage, we were actually married, I was kind of hanging out a little bit. I was still scared. I thought, I don't know if I'm going to really trust. So it takes a while once you've been hurt or burned or whatever to recover. But you can recover. You can then, now, my truth and my reality is marriage is the most wonderful thing in the world. Love it. Wouldn't have it any other way. Let me just try something else. I'm going to pick out a couple of you here in a couple of minutes to come up front with me and to talk a little bit about your own experience of what you've gone through. And now, I wish you could see what I'm seeing here. The heads are dropping down, some of the people are hiding. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to call you up, okay? That was a joke. Trick. Words trigger pictures which bring about feelings and emotion. Do you know that public speaking is the #1 most feared thing in the world? Even above the fear of dying or death? Public speaking, #1 fear. So that's why I knew that there was a pretty good chance that some of you might be going into words, trigger pictures in your mind for some of you, right? What were some of those pictures? Those of you that were maybe looking down, or and maybe emotions. Some of you might have had a little sick feeling in the pit of your stomach, even by hearing that. Oh my God, I gotta do it. You've heard it, athletics, they call it choking. That's what they do, they choke, something happens and they choke. Brett McGinnis can probably tell us all kinds of stories about things with athletes in particular. All these kinds of concepts work with all of us, whether you're working on your social skills, your academic skills, your athletic skills, or just your life skills. So if I have a self-image or a belief or an attitude that either I'm not very good as a public speaker, or I'm afraid to be a public speaker, and I perceive the opportunity in my conscious state of awareness to give a little talk to 5,000 people, what's going to happen here probably? There's going to be a conflict there, right? The creative subconscious says, don't worry about it, I'll take care of it for you. You don't have to sweat and feel nervous and feel uptight and do those things, because the subconscious will take care of that for you. In fact, you might even get sick, so sick that you would not even be able to go to the event. It's that powerful. You know, the beliefs that we have anchored in our computer run our ship. And if we perceive something that's not in that comfort zone, the creative subconscious says, no problem, I'll take care of it. Let's talk about the growth and learning process. How do we learn things? Well, it starts off with awareness. I will tell you that with all the executives that I've worked with well, stop and think about it. If you look at people like that have a problem with alcohol or drugs or things of that nature, until they have an awareness that there's an issue or a problem, they're not going to make any change, right? They're not going to care. They don't know the difference. So awareness is always the very first step to growth or change. You need to be aware. A lot of times people have blind spots or scotomas or whatever you want to call it to the truth. Once you become aware that you want to do something or you don't want to do something, and you talk about this process, we go through this very same process in every single thing that we've learned how to do in life, like walk. When you're an infant and you see all these people standing, walking around upright, and you're down here on the floor and doing your thing, I don't know for sure, but they must say, gee, you know, everybody seems to be doing it this way, and so you start trying to learn how to do that yourself. And you start by crawling, and then you start by walking, and you're kind of shaky and wobbly and whatnot, and you fall down, right? But thank goodness, kids persevere. So you go out and you practice some new skills, and it's not uncommon at all for us to reach, at first, an awkward stage. We'll fall down, we'll make mistakes, we'll get hurt. And so, you know, unfortunately, adults have a tendency, when that happens to us, we quit. You know, this doesn't feel good. I don't want to do this anymore, it's no fun. But again, if you look at a youngster, and think about this, whether you learning how to ride a bicycle, learning how to ski, learning how to drive a car, we all went through the same process. We went out and we practiced new skills, and at first, you know, we made mistakes and it was awkward. But if you persevere, you will eventually develop a new skill. And that's where your self-confidence is increased and your comfort zone level starts to increase. And after you've had that skill for a while, then you integrate that skill and it becomes automatic or habitual in terms of you don't even have to think about it. You know, driving your car and chewing gum and having the radio on and a couple kids in the back seat and all that kind of stuff. You just do it automatically, right? In fact, I have had either a change in my residence or my business location and caught myself driving to the old place on automatic pilot. You know, it's like, oh my God, you know. So, in fact, this is kind of scary, but my understanding is that the majority of our time spent driving is on automatic pilot, and that may or may not be a good thing. So, having habits are good because they allow you to do things without having to think about them. They're automatic. What becomes problematic is when we change direction or goals. And then that habit may not support that change of direction or goal. So then typically what we do is we go through a downward spiral, and I'm not going to go through it right now, but you probably, most of you have heard of the loss, the grieving process, the process of loss, and it's very similar. I also am a certified career transition coach. And so people, you know, are part of the expression that, you know, you're fat, dumb, and happy, and living on top of the world and going on automatic pilot, and all of a sudden you lose your job. Boom, that's a big deal. And it sends you into another whole spiral. And I say I won't go through the stage, but they're very similar. And the reason I mention that is that when I'm coaching executives, I start off with this model because what I really want the message for them to be is it's going to be okay for you to feel awkward during the process of trying to make the change. Because it's normal, it's a natural thing, and again, most of us as adults don't want to do that. We want to be perfect. You know, we paid our dues already, thank you very much. So, again, I just want to kind of set a construct of how our mind, our brain, our beliefs, our habits and attitudes, whatnot, how those kind of get in there to begin with, because if you're going to change them, you need to know how they got there in the first place. So awareness is the first step. How many of you heard or seen this term, the reticular activating system? Anybody? Any nursing students in here? Have you run across that one yet? That might be one you want to check out. Reticular activating system, again, coming from a Greek word which means net-like, reticular. There's a net-like group of cells at the base of our brain called the reticular activating system. And basically what it does is it controls consciousness or awareness. And again, as you see here, that some of the drugs and that type of thing can affect that part of the brain. But do you know that there's so much stimuli in our environment going on right now around us that if we responded to every bit of it, we go crazy. Stop and listen for just a minute. You hear a sound, whether that's projectors or fans or overhead lights. You probably aren't aware of the necklace around your neck, or the earrings in your ears, or the glasses on your face, or the ring on your finger, or the watch on your wrist, until I bring it to your conscious level of awareness, right? So if we responded to all of that stimulation, we go crazy. Our brain couldn't handle it. So the reticular activating system sort of acts like a executive secretary, in that it screens out the junk mail and only lets two things through to our awareness. Things of value, things of threat. Everything else it scotoma or filters out to preserve our sanity. This is one of the things I'd encourage you to make a note about. The reticular activating system is a major tool to help you go beyond what you've ever done before. That's why goal setting is so powerful and important. If you set a clear goal, it now becomes important to you. And you're going to see things and hear things and that you walk by blindly every day of the week, on your way to work, to school, whatever. It's kind of like, I don't know how many of you have infant children, any or have had. So the child is not feeling very well. Mom puts the child to bed at night, 9 o'clock, whatever time it is, and later goes to bed herself. During this time, there's all kinds of external noises going on. Cars and trucks and traffic going up and down the street outside. Maybe a television or a radio playing in the house somewhere. Maybe an airplane flying overhead. All kinds of external noise and stimulation. But mom goes to sleep. But what happens at 2 o'clock in the morning when that baby makes a slightest whimper? Right? Awake. That's of value to her, or possibly a threat. Why is it that dad, who is sleeping right next to mom, generally sleeps through that whole process? What? Because he knows mom will. He knows that he doesn't have to. It's not his job, right? Now that's changing a little bit in today's age, but still, you know, mother's nurse and that type of thing, and so typically there are some roles that the mother plays and the father doesn't. But what happens is dad gave up accountability to mom to take care of the problem. So he sleeps through it. If mom were out of town, I guarantee you, dad would wake up because he was now responsible. So personal accountability is something that is your friend. I would never give up personal accountability if I had any choice whatsoever, because it keeps you sharp, it keeps your awareness open. I challenge you, on your way home tonight, or this afternoon, or whatever, look for blue cars. Set a goal to see blue cars. And I guarantee you, you'll see cars in bushes and trees and places that you never ever thought they would be, and it's the same route that you travel every day, back and forth to work or school. So once things are of value or importance, It gets through, it gets through. Let's say that you were going to, you wanted to buy a new appliance, a washing machine, maybe your television set, stove, something like that. And all of a sudden, you know, this is kind of the old days now, I'm dating myself a little bit. Okay? But they used to be in the newspaper and catalogs and stuff like that, they would have sales. You know, and the Bon Marché would have a sale, and Sears would have a sale, and you're going through the paper and you're saying to yourself, you're rationalizing yourself, oh, aren't I lucky? I chose to buy a new washing machine today because they're on sale at this place and this place and this place. Well, the truth of the matter is, those ads are in the paper every day, but until it's of importance to us, it doesn't get through. So my mentor, Lou Tice, had a saying that I'll share with you that is, I think is really helpful. He says, you don't need to know until you need to know. In other words, you don't need to know how you're going to accomplish anything. You just need to know what it is you want to accomplish, step one. The how-to, your awareness, your reticular activating system, resources that are around you constantly will start popping up out of the woodwork. Oh, there's one, there's one, there's one. You'll be amazed to see how that works. So the reticular activating system, if you just understand this one concept, can put you 10 steps ahead of other people in terms of your ability to access resources that are around all of us all the time. Remember I said words trigger pictures which bring about feelings and emotion. Some of you may be a little old for this cartoon too, but there's a cartoon that used to run called Jughead Smith. And I think her name was Lulu, if I'm not mistaken, but here she said, frog eyes, elephant ears, pig nose, oink, oink, oink. She's trying to get under his skin. She's trying to push his buttons. And she keeps going on, duck feet, quack, quack, quack. And old Jughead Smith says, sticks and stones will break my bones, but words won't never hurt me. Any of you remember hearing that one or saying that one? Or, yeah? Well, so she gives up in disgust. That dead, burned Jughead Smith is thick-skinned as an alligator, she says. And so Jughead Smith walks away, having said sticks and stones will break. But look at what's in his mind, what he's thinking. He may not, you know, remember Eleanor Roosevelt, no one can make you feel inferior without your consent? Well, who are our experts that we listen to? And who are the people that have told us we're dumb, or we're, you know, clumsy, or we're, you know, this or we're that? Well, unless we buy into it, it's not going to have any impact. But here's the bad news and the good news. Our self-talk, so here's another thing, self-talk. We have mental conversations in our head all the time. We think about 6 to 8 times faster than I'm talking to you right now. So as I'm talking to you, you're thinking about a whole other variety of things at the same time. Lost my point here in self-talk. Let me go back to words, trigger pictures, feelings, and emotions. So in her words, you're thick-skinned as an alligator, duck feet, and quack, quack, and so on and so forth. Create a certain picture or an image in Jughead's mind, which bring about emotions or feelings. In this case, look at him, he's crying, sweating, whatever he's doing, because he's reacting, even though he may not have shown her that he was going to do that. But he owned it. And so, be careful how you talk to yourself. And be careful how you talk to other people. That's what's called self-talk. So, in self-talk, if I say to myself, how could I be so stupid for doing whatever I did, that wouldn't be so bad, except usually I don't stop there. I go on to answer the question. Well, you're stupid, because remember in 3rd grade, you were in the lowest reading group? Oh, yeah. Every time you have a thought, that imprints in your subconscious computer. An event does not actually have to occur. There's a chemical change that takes place in the neuron structure of the cell of our brain called imprinting. Anytime you have a thought and you think about that and you program it into your computer, it's kind of like when we're born with a blank canvas, pretty much a blank canvas. I'm convinced as a parent and a grandparent there are a few brush strokes here and there for my kids and grandkids, but for the most part, we have a blank canvas. And every experience we have in life, there's another brush stroke added to our canvas. Until finally, we form a picture of who we are. our self-image of who we are, who we're capable of. Our self-esteem is how we feel about who we are. And then our self-esteem and our performance reality have a tendency to go hand in hand. If you knock somebody's self-esteem down, performance will generally follow. If you raise self-esteem, performance will typically follow. I don't know how many of you follow football as an example, and I don't mean to single out football, but because Lou Tyson, Pete Carroll, and the Seahawks, and the way the Seahawks have been playing and stuff the last few years, if you pay any attention to the difference in Pete Carroll's coaching style compared to many other NFL coaches, you'll notice some drastic differences and changes. Instead of saying, you know, how could you screw that up? You know, you kicked the ball off the side of your foot and it went over here and over and sit down and think about it. The old time coach might have said. Well, Pete Carroll and the more progressive people and Stacy, I'm sure, can talk or give you information about, she worked with the Olympic skating team at one time, right? And so superstars, they visualize and they think about not the problem, but the solution. So rather than thinking about the problem, they talk about the solution. Let's get my next. So imagination times vividness becomes a reality on the subconscious level. This is a very, very high leverage tool for you. Mark it down, write it down. The way you talk to other people, the way you talk to yourself has an effect on your subconscious. What you think about then, in terms of visualizing, will then affect the reality of what is called truth or reality on the subconscious level, and subsequently your performance. So it's really as simple, actually, as changing that mechanism. And it might be easy to understand, but it's difficult to do. There's also a technique that, and so visualization is a technique that many professional athletes, so not even professional, all athletes, almost everybody has a sports psychologist nowadays, and they work on the mental part of the game. They visualize. I think the skier Jean-Claude Keely many years ago was one of the first people, I think a French skier, who publicly did this visualization process where he would go in his mind and he would run the slalom course over and over and over again, down to the detail of what his time would be within a hundredth of a second. And then he'd go out and actually run the race, and that would be the result he would produce. So what you get is what you think about or see or believe that you can get. And so if you're not getting what you want to get, there's a way to change that. There's a way to turn it around. If you consider yourself to be a B student and you want to be an A student, then you need to start making affirmations about, yourself as an A student rather than a B student. Trying to think of an example I can give you for, going back to my example about public speaking. I think we can all kind of relate to that. And so if I don't think I'm a very good public speaker, the way I might, in fact, I've done this in my own life, whether it's a setting like this, a training room. I've done a lot of corporate training over the years. I've traveled all around the world, different settings and whatnot. But almost always, what I would do is usually arrive the night before. I'd go into a room like this if I could, and get a sense of what's the room look like, what are the colors, how are the people going to look, And in my mind, I can start practicing my talk before I ever get on stage. And the way I can enhance that to be more powerful in terms of programming is that I can bring in feeling and emotion into that picture. So you can go back and think of a time in your life, maybe when you were a youngster and you had a very pleasant experience or a successful experience. Any of you can think of those, one of those right now? Sometimes you felt really proud, really good. You achieved something. If you can see that or remember that in your mind, can you recapture the feeling or the emotion that you actually experienced at that time? Most of us can. I can remember, for my grandmother growing up, the smell in her house. She lived in Kashmir, and there were all kinds of smells there with the mill that was in operation at the time, and there would be a big noon whistle that would blow, and whenever I go back, I can still smell and hear and feel some of those same things that I had at an early age that was very pleasant or successful for me. You take the image of what you want to be, an A student or whatever it is, a public speaker, visualize in your mind hundreds of times. It's like to your subconscious, you've done it 100 times. It's not like it's the first time, it's 100 times. So, self-talk, there's also something called affirmations, which a lot of times people use. Affirmation are a set of words that basically set your mind to the words and trigger the pictures. So there are some rules about writing affirmations. You write them in first person, present tense, and they're always positive. And so a lot of professional athletes use that to trigger their visualization process. First person, I, me, my, it's about me. It's not about anybody else. It's about me. I am, I have, I possess it right now in my mind. And then you bring in those feelings of success from the past and blend that into the visualization process. Extremely powerful. I'm going to skip this one just for time. I want to get to, go back to this. Motivation. Here's this one that might be hard to read, but Dink has a self-image problem. He thinks he's dumb. He thinks he can't pass the school test. And his teacher says, I made it especially easy for you. I want to find a way to help you, Dinkley. He says, no, I'm just not good at tests. I get all mixed up. I can't help it. I'm dumb. But look what happens when it's time for him to take his driver's license test. He's out the door, Yahoo, get out of my way, because I'll run you down. He wants it. He likes it. He loves it. It's his idea. So it's not about ability. Remember I told you that we only use, 5 to 8% or whatever it is, a small part of our potential. Well, if you're doing what you love to do, there's no better way to motivate yourself than what they call intrinsically or from the inside out, because you want it, you like it, you love it. It's called constructive positive motivation. So find that in yourself and find that in other people that you're working with, and you'll find that you're going to get a lot better success than trying to have you or other people conform to what they think you should do or what you think they should do. We can only work on ourselves. So I'm going to just kind of hold off on that, and there is one last slide that's just sort of and you can kind of go through these. That was one on time management. I saw that you had a time management series in this series recently. Time, we all have a certain amount of time. It's all limited. We all get the same amount. Why is it that some people do a better job with the time they have allotted than others? And so there's some tools and techniques about that. So again, prioritizing. You can't, we all have the same amount of time, and yet, we can only do so much. You go ahead and turn that light on if you like. So here's some specifics, and I'll send this to you. Specific weekly written goals. When I do executive coaching, that's the number one thing I do. As I have people write goals, and the beginning of the next week, we review them. How'd you do? What worked? What didn't work? What do you do differently? Self-talk and visualization. I talked to you about that one. Be aware of that, because it's powerful. Expanding your comfort zones, and the way you do that is one step at a time. You don't try to climb Mount Everest in one beginning step or series of steps. You train. You go 10 or 15 feet up the mountain, and then you go another 10 or 15 feet up the mountain. So cut yourself a little slack and be realistic about the goals that you set. Continue to stretch yourself in the direction you want to go. Personal state is something. Any of you heard of Tony Robbins? Anthony Robbins? I had the opportunity to go through a live seminar with him back in the 80s. And he wrote a book called Unlimited Power that I also recommend that you might want to take a look at. He works a lot in the area of what they call neuro-linguistic programming. But basically, it's personal state. One of the things I learned from him is that our physiology controls how we show up to the world. So, don't raise your hands, but how many of you have either been depressed or know people that are depressed? Or don't raise your hand. Don't have to. Most of them, probably all of us. What's the body language like for people who are depressed? Down, right? So Tony had us do an exercise where everybody in the room, several hundred people, had to get up and stand as tall as you could and raise your hand and scream at the loud top of your voice and smile, I'm depressed! Try it. You can't be depressed with that physiology. So your physiology, the way you handle or position yourself, will oftentimes create that state. Little simple tool. And then he goes into much greater detail about how you can form triggers to change things. support structures and accountability. You need to have help. You need to have encouragement. Coaches, teachers, parents, spouses, parents, whatever. And accountability. Remember I told you that accountability is really critical to success. Don't give it up. Don't give it up. And treat failure as a learning experience. We all fail. Look at all the people that have been most successful in almost every realm of our history. Babe Ruth supposedly hit however many home runs and held the record for many, many years. But I also understand that he had the record for strikeouts, or people with stolen bases, or, so we have a tendency to put people on pedestals, and that's not realistic. There's a price that people pay to get to where they get. So I say, don't take yourself too seriously. Enjoy the process as much as you can. When you make a mistake, learn from it, and the next time. So the key thing in self-talk is, instead of how can I be so stupid, it's the next time I'm going to do it this way. The next time I'll act this way. That make sense? Yes. Finally, again, a little touch of reality. Dreaming is all great and fine and wonderful, but you also requires discipline, it requires commitment, it requires consistency. Get people to help you on your team. Thank you very much for your attention. And I'll open it up very quickly. Anybody have any specific questions before you have to leave? And I will stick around also as long as you like. But any burning questions from anybody? We're covering a lot of information, I know. Make sense?
I don't know. I don't know what you understand.